I'd like to begin by thanking all of you for inviting Andy and I today to share reflections with you. It is truly an honor to be invited to do so. On June 17th, 2000, Andy Swanson and I married right here in this church. It was a wonderful ceremony. The Reverend Virginia Wolf officiated, and we were supported by an incredible number of family, friends, colleagues, and members of this congregation. It was a great public manifestation for us and for all in attendance of what it means and of how and why it is valuable to be living out. Yet both Andy and I had been living out long before then, and we have continued since. Growing up in Connecticut in the 1970s, I did not conceive of the possibility I might be gay due to pervasive disparagement and ridicule directed at gay people. Still, I refused to participate in what I recognized as hate. As an undergraduate at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, I also began to believe it was important for me, as a straight person, to show solidarity publicly with gay people. But it still came as a shock to me when I fell in love with my best friend, a man, at the start of my work toward a PhD at Syracuse University. I was then, as had long been the case before, and has continued since, heavily involved in progressive to radical forms of left activism. That involvement, as well as my intellectual work toward a PhD, led me to immerse myself in learning about and soon enthusiastically identifying with revolutionary gay liberation. Soon as well, I concentrated in queer theory right as queer theory first emerged as a distinct kind of critical theory. Because I was that kind of person, I wanted to be out as gay everywhere. I knew this was the politically right thing for me to do. So a little over 4 weeks after first accepting that, yes, it makes sense for me to identify as gay to myself, I began to do so publicly as well. And yes, I did so even in the face of a considerable hostility. As a result of this history, I was notorious before I arrived in Eau Claire and at UW-Eau Claire. For my first 10 years in Eau Claire and at UW-Eau Claire, I was exceedingly prominent living out as gay. I spoke frequently on LGBTQIA issues in many forums, and I involved myself in a host of efforts to help change the climate on campus and in the wider community so many more people could live freely out as well. It was often exhausting, but it was worth it. I did help make a positive difference. Since that time, I have continued living out as fully and continuously as ever. What changed is steadily larger numbers of others have done so too. It has been a blessing for me that many others have taken the lead locally in subsequent efforts. When I first mention Andy to students in the classes I teach, I refer to Andy as my life partner. I do so even before I identify Andy as my husband. I conceive of our marriage as the public manifestation of a commitment toward partnering in the ongoing creation and recreation of a life. This is a life equivalent neither with my life, nor with Andy's life, nor even with my life plus Andy's life. This is a new life, a life of its own, a life that transcends the limits of each of our individual lives. It is a life that empowers us as its representatives to do far more and far better than we possibly could without our engagement in this partnership to be abuse. In the midst of adversity, I have survived, I have persisted, and I have endured because of the love Andy and I share, and because I could not, I would not, I cannot, and I will not ever give up on the life we have committed toward partnering and continually creating and recreating together. Andy and I often discuss how amazing it is that we have been able to do so much of what we have done together, and to do so because we are and have been together. This includes travel to exciting destinations, it includes attending and participating in spectacular events, it includes studying, learning, and preparing to teach new classes focused on innovative topics. It includes joining and contributing and taking on leading roles in organizations we otherwise would never have considered, or to which we otherwise would not have thought we could possibly contribute anything of value. In my own life, it would have been far more devastating if not for this life partnership and this love in struggling with and through the onset, the deepening, and the cumulative weight of multiple serious chronic illnesses, mental and physical, that have been significantly disabling. Without this life partnership and without this love, I could not have transformed that kind of personal experience into a principal focus of what and how I teach, the scholarship I do, and the community service I do as well. Without this life partnership and without this love, I could not have accepted the need for me to pull back, to cut back, to reorient what and how much I do with my life, while continuing to believe I am still worthwhile, that I still can and still will continue to be abused. And without this life partnership and without this love, neither Andy nor I would ever dream of embarking on a dramatically new adventure upon retirement, as we will with the start of June 2024 to move to and live full-time in San Diego. This will be, for us, life in a new city, in a new region, vastly different from everywhere we have previously lived, and where we are just beginning to find resources and make connections. This church and this congregation have been indispensable in contributing to that very same life partnership and that very same love. We have always been welcome, included, respected, supported, and encouraged here, including in our love and commitment to each other. We love this church and this congregation, and we'll be forever grateful for all you have given to and made possible for us. At our wedding back in 2000, I spoke to make clear I firmly believed queer people in diverse kinds of relationships all deserved to be equally respected, valued, affirmed, celebrated, and empowered, and that I did not want anyone to mistake Andy's and my marriage as endorsing the position that our relationship mattered more than those others simply because it was a marriage. Even now, with legal same-sex marriage, and even now, with legitimate fear that powerful forces aim to take this back, I still firmly believe the ultimate goal must be to make it genuinely possible for a vast array of diverse queer people to lead their best possible lives and to live out freely in doing so, so that we can all benefit from all they have to offer. Today, living out means facing up to renewed, frightening attacks on queer people, especially transgender and gender non-binary people. But living out today also means envisioning what a truly liberated society might be like in terms of gender and sexuality, as well as in terms beyond gender and sexuality. And it means committing ourselves to doing what it takes to get from here to there. We need imaginative visions of what never yet was, but what nevertheless yet could be. We know this nevertheless yet could be because glimmers and sparks and even bursts and flares anticipating what that might be do exist within our collective past and do exist within our collective present. I know I will continue to dream of these possibilities and commit to help realize these dreams even when such prospects appear absurd, even when they appear hopeless and impossible. And I know that I will continue to do so, even as an older person, even as a person living with multiple chronic illnesses, even as someone starting all over in a new city, and even after ending the major focus of my life's activity for 40 years, teaching and working as a university faculty member. I know I will continue to do so because of the love Andy and I share in the life partnership we continually create and recreate together, while reaping a whirlwind of inspiration and uplift from loving communities like this one. Thank you.
As we continue to celebrate the contemporary times of the LGBTQ movement, it's important to always recognize the voices of the past. The last century really was a transformational time, and anyone that can see the world in a before Stonewall and after Stonewall will see that there's a lot of beauty, a lot of defiance, a lot of love. That those stories are kind of tucked along the way. As we get closer to coming out day, I think it's also a good time to remember that there's a beginning of everyone's identity. So the next readings that I'm going to be talking about talk kind of a little bit of an intermingle of that. So these are two excerpts from the first chapter of Another Mother Tongue, Gay Words, Gay Worlds by Judy Grahn. Our color is purple, or lavender, my first lover affirmed, intensely whispering to my avid and puzzled young ears the forbidden litany of who we were or might be. No one knows why this is, it just is, handsome Bonnie said, her lips against me like the vibrant breasts of birds, and her voice timbered as an alto song, her words like half-remembered ballad or blues lyrics that sounded stranger than the ancient English describing fragments of a story neither of us could recognize. She taught me the words of gay life. She could not tell me what they meant. She wore a ring on her little finger as a badge of her gayness, and the first thing she brought for me as a love and gay entry token was a slender silver and turquoise ring for the little finger on my left hand. She could not tell me what this had to do with our love for each other or our decision to attempt the difficult task of living together as lovers instead of taking the socially ordained path of marrying men, a continual pressure we were subjected to by every person we knew, except other lesbians. 11 years and many travels later, in February 1969, in California, at the first West Coast meeting of the new wave of gay liberation that was to sweep across the country throughout the 70s on the heels of the feminist movement, which was on the heels of the Black movement and on the eve of marching off with 6 other women to form a lesbian feminist separatist configuration. I presented a paper calling it for all gay people to organize, as other groups had organized. In honor of our subterranean culture, I called the paper The Purple Fist. When radical lesbian feminists made themselves visible as a group in New York City in the early 1970s, they called themselves the Lavender Menace. Lesbian poet Fran Winant called her publishing enterprise Violet Press, and soon a songwriter-singer, Alex Dobkin, produced an album, Lavender Jane Loves Women. In Baltimore, lesbian-owned Diana Press published an anthology, Lavender Herring. Purple book jackets appeared on books and dictionaries, produced by gay poets and writers of both sexes, and purple t-shirts announced gay slogans of affirmation from diverse groups of people all over the country. As though some mysterious hand had planted bulbs all over the land, we lavender folk sprang up, spontaneously flowering in the color we had learned as an identifying mark of our culture when it was just subterranean and secret.
Authenticity. Bob, of course, wrote what he would say even before I started working what I would say. I admit, when he gave it to me, there were moments I didn't want to read it ahead of time, to hear his words for the first time, not knowing what he was going to say. I love the way he speaks in public, the thought that goes into the pauses, the emphasis on phrasings. But I always knew that I couldn't plan what I was going to say without knowing what he would. This service is called Living Out, and the theme of the month is heritage. Unlike Bob, there was not really a time when I felt that I might be straight, though I pretended. Flashback, 12th grade. I really liked my physics class and the teacher, Mr. Wargo. For some reason, I was not disappointed but devastated to learn that he smoked. And why that was even important to me, I could not say. I had no words. Further back. Without my glasses, I can't really see beyond about here. 9th grade swimming class. Tim Warnicki steps through the door into the locker room complaining that someone has stolen his towel while he was swimming. I've just put on my glasses, and I can see him standing in the doorway, soaked, shivering. I felt my heart race. Why? I could not say. I had no words. Further back still, before 6th grade, when we moved to that school district, our neighbor, David Broadwater, he was about the same age as my older brother and I. We all played together, and I always thought he was so, I could not say. I had no words. Growing up as a proto-gay kid in the 1970s and early 80s, I had no words, no heritage. I had no words or firm way to describe what I felt. I could not say, and I could not see me. What did I know of being queer except for rumors, innuendo, and stereotypes? Guys who were almost certainly not gay, making remarks to each other in the high school gym locker room. A friend on a field trip telling a shaggy dog story that ended like this. And then the knight told the king that as a reward, he did not want to marry either of the two princesses. He wanted to marry the king, because this was a fairy tale. Part of what's striking, of course, was that a man wanted to marry a man. Yes, it made me uncomfortable to hear that in the context of a joke, but really, it was mostly a pun on the phrase fairy tale. At the time, I barely knew what that word was. That word also was a reference to what I was feeling. And there was no me in that innuendo. Sure, my parents had what might be considered a good Unitarian bookshelf. I remember a book about puberty. I think the title was What's Happening to Me? There were separate versions for boys and girls, or maybe separate chapters for boys and girls. There was a page about how a boy's developing general interest in girls would become more focused on a particular girl. But I felt no general interest of girls. When would that come? In high school, I pretended when asked, suggested girls I might want to date if I had the courage to ask. Courage may have been lacking, but motivation was more the problem. There was no me in that book about growing up. In the late 1970s, there was a late-night TV show called Soap, a sort of comic adult take on daytime soap operas. Billy Crystal played an extremely stereotypical gay florist. I don't remember it very well, but I do recall that it was probably about 2 seasons before he had a boyfriend on screen rather than just referred to. But I was a nerdy teen interested in science. There was no me in that stereotype. I could not see me. I did not feel real. So So, living out, what is that about? The reading I chose from Judy Grahn was a revelation when I found it, a hidden heritage I had not known before, a heritage that lived and grew before I could see it, before I could see me. When I came out, when I could finally name myself, when I could begin to see me, I still needed to see myself and other people. My activism started out of a need for community, for heritage. In my second year of graduate school, my second year of being out to myself, I was a part of a group organizing a trip from our school and community. I was going to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York at the time, to the October 11th, 1987 March on Washington, the event that is commemorated by National Coming Out Day. That's why October 11th. And there, the moving, frightening, striking first display of the AIDS quilt, and those panels, friends and family trying to capture a bit of someone's life, friend, book lover, scientist, a shattered mirror to see me, a hard time to live out. I learned to do what we called zaps at Cornell, panel discussions where we would talk about being gay or lesbian for a class or a student organization or a community group. It was scary. Teaching has never been as scary as the first few of those. Flash forward. In 1987, I moved here. I had been living out to some degree for over a decade. Always a struggle, always having to push to be out. Bob and I were both out faculty members, Bob more than me at that time, and at National Coming Out Day events at UWC, there were just a few faculty, just us sometimes, that would speak for the first few years. And here I joined this community. I met Virginia and Carol. I knew I wouldn't have to struggle so hard to live out. And here I met Bob. And Bob already talked about living out together, how much easier it is to be seen when we are seen together. Two men at a very nice restaurant for that Valentine's Day dinner, not a coincidence. Those who did not refuse to see could see we were living out together. When we were seen and seen as part of a community that embraces us living out. And living out for some better to see themselves, to not feel unreal and alone. And here, in community, in living out, in reflection I see in his eyes, there I can see me better. Here I see a better me. Here we see us.